Hey everybody, this is Tobias Hagelin, Young Life Area Director in East County, and this is the second part of our belonging training as part of our continuing education for Young Life leaders. And what I'm going to be talking in this video is a little bit about this concept of proxemics. So you're going to see a little bit in the training about what proxemics is, but essentially proxemics is just a way to think about comfort and discomfort with relationship using these distances to help us understand the depth and intimacy that come within relationship. And what I mean by that is super simple. Here's the example. And so there's this 12 plus feet dynamic, 12 feet out. Really think about somebody standing at this distance away from you and how you might regard how close you are with that person based on that stance. And so 12 plus feet would be called this public space. So public space in proxemics is this idea of kind of everyone can kind of be included in this. These aren't necessarily all the people that you know personally, but you could be standing out in community and someone could be 12 feet away. Oh, they're in my public space. The next level of that is the social space, and that's 4 to 12 feet. So that could be anywhere from somebody that's maybe it's someone you've just met to 4 feet away, where it's like, oh, we're in this together. I know of you, you know of me, and so there's that kind of depth of relationship. The next level is personal space, which is 18 inches to 4 feet. Personal space is there's a lot of key things that come out with personal space, but it's somebody who you might say, oh, I know them personally. They have a personal experience with me. They know me as based on that's a relationship I have with that person that's separate from other people. The next level of it is intimate space, and that's anywhere from touching to 18 inches. And so that one's pretty obvious, but these are people you'd be intimate with. They know you really well. You wouldn't be uncomfortable hugging this person, and you might even want to or be drawn to do that. And so inside of that, the spoiler alert when it comes to youth culture is that the social belonging, that 4 to 12 feet, tends to actually be what teenagers are craving. I think, again, here's some other facts that we're debunking, but we tend to think that all kids want a new best friend. And all kids, they really want to have, and again, it's that worship of the one-on-one. And we could think that we're not giving kids what they need, we're not providing for their sense of belonging if we're not in the intimate space with kids all the time. But that's not necessarily true. I think our job as youth leaders and our job as Young Life leaders is to help kids feel belonging in all 4 of those spaces. You'll read more about that in the training. And then belonging happens when you identify with another entity, person, organization, group, or collective. And so that's really what belonging is. It's I identify with you. I feel as though I belong to you and you belong to me. And here's a kicker. Belonging doesn't need to be reciprocal. And what I mean by that is that's another misnomer that we have is in order to feel belonging, whatever it is you feel belonging to needs to feel belonging in return back to you. And so an example that I might use is I'm a big Dallas Cowboys fan. Love the Cowboys. They have absolutely no idea who I am. And so while I feel belonging, I'm a fan, I'm in it, I love these guys, I love the team, I love the culture around it, but they don't know who I am. And they don't need to know who I am in order for me to be a fan, in order for me to feel like I belong. And so that's in that public space of belonging. I do experience belonging at that level. I don't need other things to take that spot because I feel like I belong somewhere. And so that's what I mean by reciprocal. And so something to think about as a Young Life leader is, I don't know about you, but I know I've been in places where I've been stuck where I feel like I belong to this kid. I feel a sense of belonging. I feel accountable to this kid. I want to have a relationship with them. But then it doesn't seem that they want to give that back, and that can be really frustrating. Or you might have a kid that's all about you, and you just don't tend to seem to connect with them on that level. And that's okay. That's really what the message is that's okay, and you are providing that kid a sense of belonging by just being you. And you don't necessarily have to be that kid's savior. You don't have to be that kid's best friend in order to provide that need. And you also don't need kids to see you that way in order for you to feel like you care about kids and to lean into them and to love on them. You don't necessarily need that to be reciprocal in order to be able to enjoy that experience in relationship with kids. Another phrase that you want to remember is belonging is opt-in, and it's 100% in control of the person that's considering it. It is not up to me if kids feel belonging to me or not. It's not up to the Dallas Cowboys whether or not I feel belonging to them. And so that's important, I think, for us to hear, because we have to release that. We have to release that and know that we can't fabricate that experience with kids. A little bit more, Jesus was a master of allowing people to experience belonging in all 4 spaces. As you read the scriptures, you see how he help the 5,000 feel belonging with him. 5,000 people, and this is just the men, women, children, chase after him and hung on every word that he said. But he didn't know all their names. You know, he didn't spend individual time with them all the time, but he cared for them. He fed them. He spoke to them. So there was this sense of belonging that people felt at that large level. And then he had his 72, of which are the people. These are the ones that really loved his talk on the Sermon on the Mount, and they loved the things that he said, and they wanted to follow him, and they wanted to shape their life after him. But they didn't have the kind of access that the 12 disciples did, which had more access to Jesus. They traveled with him. They stayed at the same houses. They ate at the same table as him. But even they didn't have as much intimacy with him as Peter, James, and John, these three people that he brought up to the mountain of transfiguration with him, and these guys that he invited to go pray with him in the garden before his crucifixion. There was these levels that Jesus allowed these people to experience belonging with him. And so we can almost model our relationship with students in the context of Young Life after that. But true community happens in all four of those spaces. If you're missing a feeling of belonging in one of those spaces, it can be alienating, even if you're experiencing belonging in all three of those other spaces. And so the journey of Young Life then is to be in the community, in the lives of kids, to give kids an opportunity to experience belonging with Young Life in whatever way is going to feed them and support them and help them know that they matter. And every kid's going to experience that in a different way. Another thing to remember is community happens spontaneously. It's not something that you can fabricate. You can't make kids feel like they belong to Young Life, and there's a lot of kids that won't. And it's a crapshoot on who it's going to be. And so that's why we remain prayerful and trust, and we remain faithful, allowing the Spirit to convict and the Spirit to move and draw kids in to the context of Young Life. And we don't have to be the ones doing that. We get to just be faithful and available to the different places where God gives us a clue on where a kid needs to feel like they belong. So we can facilitate those environments to help kids connect, but we can't force it. So another thing you'll read on there, digging into the four spaces, public belonging occurs when people connect through an outside influence, kind of like my example to the Dallas Cowboys. They experience that when they connect to something outside of themselves. Social belonging occurs when they share snapshots of who they are. It's that environment where kids get to come into Young Life and they get to be like, I'm part of this piece. This is who I am. This is my name. This may be an interest that I have. But they can experience belonging and just being able to be a part of the group. Personal belonging occurs when we share private but not naked experience, feelings, and thoughts. And intimate belonging occurs when we share naked information and we're not ashamed. And so what I've said is what a relationship with God really feels like is supposed to feel like is being fully known and then fully loved. And so I think that's a definition we can take into that intimate space as we talk about that personal relationship with Jesus. And that's how we model that to kids of what it means to have a relationship with God. It's to be fully known by them and fully loved. Community has a compound formula. It's public to the eighth, social to the fourth, personal to the second, intimate to the one. And basically what that means is that, for every intimate relationship you have, you'll probably accordingly have two private relationships or personal relationships, sorry. And then for every two personal relationships, you'll have 4 social relationships. And for every social relationships, you'll have 8 public relationships. And so I'm not just loyal to the Dallas Cowboys and no other sports team on the planet, but I'm a fan of a lot of things. But I have one wife and I have very few best friends and I have very few groups where I feel comfortable in. And so that compound formula is that while you may feel like you belong to bigger things, a lot of them, you're more likely to feel intimate with very few spaces. So I want you guys to just kind of wrestle with that and just to think about that. And a question that we're going to have you think through is, how does Young Life play into these different spaces? And how does the role of a Young Life leader change as kids kind of opt into these different environments where they're hoping to experience belonging? So I hope this training for belonging was helpful for you. Always talk to your team leader or talk to the staff and really jump into this stuff with you. What I found for me is it both empowered me to be faithful to relationships that were confusing and also helped me take off the weight and release some relationships that I didn't quite understand. All this is really to point to faithfulness, that we continue to show up in those different spaces for kids and that we become the hole fillers. We stand in the gap and we ensure that every kid gets a chance to identify, opt into the space where they want to belong, and that we get to joyfully say, yes, of course you do. So I hope that's helpful, and always praying for you guys, grateful for all that you do, and bless you.